So welcome to today, and thanks for putting your staff ID or your email into the chat for me. I'd just like to also tell you that completing this workshop satisfies your professional development requirements for HDR supervision for 2 years. So it's really important that you let us know that you are here. Sometimes we have some issues, so you will get a follow-up email from me saying thank you for attending, or sorry you didn't come. If in fact it is wrong, please let us know and we can adjust that. Okay, so I just also like to say to you, at the moment we have a really intimate group of participants here, and I hopefully more people will come in, but I really do encourage you to interact with each other. Some of you may be new to supervision, some of you are more experienced, and I think you can really benefit from each other's experiences. So that's something I'd like to get you to do as well. All right, so just a little bit of housekeeping. I think we all know how to do Zoom now, but you can private message me if you like, or chat to everyone. Okay, so if you will allow me, I'll start with the acknowledgement. QUT acknowledges the Turrbal and Yagara as the First Nations owners of the lands where QUT stands and where I stand in my home here in New Farm. We pay respect to their elders, laws, customs and creation spirits. We recognise that these lands have never been ceded and they've always been places of teaching, research and learning. QUT acknowledges the important role that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people play within our community. All right, so I'm just going to record. Oh, it is recording. Thank you. Is that right? Thank you, Ivy. Okay. All right, so I'm sharing this slide with you to begin with. So last year at a research forum, the DVCR, Christopher Barnaculic, created and shared this slide. I think it was called Live and Unplugged. And this slide summarizes the qualities that he envisages for you, the QUT supervisor. So you can see there's a list here. We have research, support, and practice. I think it's nice for you to be able to reflect on that, but I'd like to draw your attention to the support section and the second point, and that is to provide feedback that is supportive and actionable. Also, the third point, the third section, practice, and then the third point of that is to commit to ongoing professional development of their supervisory practices. So that's what you're all doing here today. The topic is feedback. So once again, thanks for coming along, and I hope you are able to get a lot out of it. We only have five or six people here. So again, it is quite intimate, but I hope you're able to connect with each other. You will have an opportunity to talk as well. So this is how I've structured the workshop today. So we're talking about what is feedback for your HDR students, because it's unlike other feedback. I'll be giving a small reference to cross-cultural considerations, but I'd like to let you know that there's a whole workshop dedicated to cross-cultural considerations. And if you are interested in that, I encourage you to come along. I think there's one coming up actually, but I will let you know in a follow-up email as well. Excuse me. A big chunk of today's workshop will be me talking about strategies for giving feedback. But again, please interact with me in the chat with each other. I'll turn your mic on if you like. And there is an opportunity for you to have some reflection today in the breakout room. And once again, you're really going to get the most out of it by contributing with your colleagues, especially those who are from different disciplines as well. Okay, so here we go. What is feedback? So before we look at the actual techniques, I want to remind you that feedback to the HDR student is unlike other feedback. So as a supervisor, you are busy. You're not only helping your students research and helping them to make that original contribution to their field, which I'm continually telling them to do. Your role is also to develop your student as a researcher. So that means there's an active process of, as you can see these points here, of teaching, training, and developing your student to become an independent researcher because they are becoming experts in their field. Okay. So I've got this quote, this wonderful quote here by Hattie. And I think it's important to really consider this today. The most powerful single influence on achievement is feedback. So I'm actually the language and learning educator, and in the grad team, and I provide writing support to your students. But my own personal interest is in feedback. And I find this is a common theme in the literature. And I think that's why it's really important that you're here today, and it's really important that you get the feedback you're giving your student right. Another great quote is the role of feedback is at the heart of the supervisor's learning process. It's part of the learning process. It's inevitable. In actual fact, this Thursday, I'm doing a feedback workshop to your students. And so I like to do them in the same week because it's fresh in my mind. So I have a workshop for supervisors, and it's sort of like a mirror workshop to your students. If your students need to come along, please tell them to register for that event as well. One of the ultimate aims of doctoral education is to train scholars to become independent. That means to become highly regulated, self-regulated learners. So moving along with that theme about feedback is that it's really important for you to know and remember that feedback processes cannot be one-sided. And I'll be explaining this to your students on Thursday. Effective feedback processes require partnership, they require interaction, and they require dialogue. So we'll be going through that in detail. Excuse me, I'm being quite sick this year. Every time I do a workshop, I have a little cough, so apologies for my little cough. So I guess I'd also just like to go through these points with you here. Feedback, it's not just information giving, it's that two-way communicative process. It's not just teacher talk, teacher commentary. It's how your student generates, makes sense of, and uses feedback for ongoing improvement. Your student must be an active feedback agent. And I've highlighted that because I highlight that to them in their workshop. I often remind your students that they have to be part of the process, that feedback process. Feedback is a catalyst for self-regulated learning, and I'll be talking to them a lot about that, and I'll be bringing that up with you again later today. When they do uptake your feedback, it can lead to change in behavior, cognition, motivation, and also attitude. And again, it's not a product, it's a process, and it's driven by your students, not your teachers. And just for your interest, I want to tell you that what I do in my workshops to your students is I say to them, you have to care for your supervisor. It's your job. Often students come into this relationship thinking, oh, the supervisor is going to take care of me, and I'm going to be protected by them. But it's really the opposite. I always say to them, you need to care and maintain the relationship you have with your students. I'm just going to pause to make sure that you are all here and everything's fine, because I feel like I'm just speaking to a screen at the moment. Just give me a thumbs up that you can all hear me and it's all okay.
I can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you so much.
My voice heard.
It's funny when you're doing sessions like this. Okay, thank you. Thanks so much. All right, so as I said at the start, I really want this to be sort of an interactive workshop, and I know it is quite intimate. But I'd like you just to, turn on your mic if you like, put it into the chat or something. But what do you think your role as the supervisor is to do? So I'll let you write it in the chat if you like, or turn your mic on. Okay, thank you. Ken, do I call you Ken? Ken says to share experiences. Good. To provide the HDR student with guidance to enhance their research expertise so they can become an independent researcher. That's Rebecca out there. Hi, Rebecca. Thank you so much. And I think that is perfectly eloquently written. Help the students with guidance to achieve their milestones. Good.
I've still got my wrong bracket turned on. Sorry.
Hi, Victoria.
Hello.
Hi, would you like to add something?
Hi. Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say to act as a sounding board for their ideas and where they think they're going with their research. Yeah, I think others have kind of covered off most of that, but I find that that's I don't want to sort of push their ideas in one direction or another, but give them the opportunity to come up with their own ways of doing things and guide them with that. And
yeah, excellent. And there's strategies to be able to do that, which we'll be going through today as well. Thank you. Thanks for turning on your camera and mic.
Okay.
Dr. DaCosta has also said to help them develop the confidence to think independently. And it's really interesting. Like I constantly say to them, you are that active feedback agent and you're the expert, you're becoming the expert. And yeah, it's really important. All right, so I have a slide with some other ideas that we can look at. So first we have, let me just get my slide. So to guide your students from being that novice to expert, ultimately they are becoming part of their academic scholarly community. We're also, your job and my job is to train them to become independent and self-regulated learners. I sometimes get emails from students just before something's due and saying, can you please format my document? My document's due tomorrow. It's like, well, no, that's your job. And they need to be responsible and self-regulated. They have to engage in critical reflection, synthesis, evaluation. Your job is also, and as Victoria mentioned, you're guiding your students to generate original knowledge so that they can make that contribution. And there's the other skills, research management, time management, so many others, and we'll be looking at different skills as well. So in preparation for today, I've been doing some current reading and I just loved this. This it's from this year, Chu, Macht and Haraveld. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but this is what they talk about when they talk about effective feedback. And just look at all these words. I guess I'll just read it out for you. Effective feedback is suggestive and constructive. It's brief, frequent and regular, actionable, specific and tailored, and we'll be talking about tailored later, explicit, honest but empathetic and tactful, formal, supportive and encouraging, advising, appreciative and respectful but critical. So I just thought that I would throw that in there as well. And when we talked about your job is to help them identify those other skills. So I was reading this this article about the 7 essential transferable skills that all PhDs have. These are all clickable links. I'll send the slides out to you later and you'll be able to read this if you like. But the 7 they have here are written communication, research, public speaking, project management, leadership, critical thinking, and collaboration. At QUT, we have a wheel that we've developed, and we've just actually summarized that from 20 skills to 12. But something else that you may, and these skills outlined here are part of the skills that we have. And just for those of you who may not know, we also have an e-grad school as part of our team. And these modules actually help with all that skills development. If your students don't know about it, ask them to get involved. They're 5-week modules. They're self-paced. They're absolutely amazing. There's a certificate at the end of them. And I do some of them as well, just to have a look. And yeah, I highly recommend for you to recommend your students to get involved. Something that I'm really interested in and is in my own research is the skill that supervisors need. So I thought I've got a little picture here of a break dancer. And I thought I'd give you the opportunity. So we all know, we all talk about skills that students need, but I just wanted to get you to reflect on the skills that you need. I'll just refer to Ken's message here. eGrad School is an excellent initiative. Not many people know about it. And it is so true, Ken. It really is amazing. It can also form part of their annual report. They get certificates and everything. And I think it just really helps them to realize, hey, I'm researching this topic, but look at this skill that I'm learning along the way. All right, so coming back to the supervisors, what do you think are the skills that you need? So I've written one there for you because this is one that I think is important. Would you like to add any more? So we have communication. You need to be good at communication as a supervisor. What else do you think you need? Patience. Good. So similar to the students, Rebecca is suggesting organizational skills, like time management. Yeah, for sure. Oh, that's a great one. Would you like to elaborate on that, Dr. DaCosta? If you're able to put your mic on.
Sure, I would. Yeah. Sorry, I've had a bit of a cough, so my voice
Me
sounds
too, no
croaky.
worries.
This is not 7:30, so it's fine. We're not broadcasting. So I say empathy because I happen to have supervised. By the way, I'm Stashay. All right, Dr. DaCosta was for the students.
Oh, sorry. What's your name?
Stashay. I would put it up.
Thank you.
I will put it up so that it makes it easier. I usually have the students usually have to call me Dr. DaCosta. So that's a reason for that.
You.
Okay. So empathy is really important because especially when you're dealing with international students, because what happens is they're entering a new culture, new cultural space, and certain things that are obvious to them are not obvious to everybody else. So you have to, first of all, learn to listen to them and learn to appreciate the fact that they're coming from a different culture and a different space. I don't want to go into too much detail because we may not have the time. The other thing that's really important is to remember that they may be coming with a lot of enthusiasm, but they don't know a lot about the subject area. In fact, they probably don't even know that that's not what they want to do. So you have to be able to work with them to get them to understand, to identify what their strengths are in terms of subject matter, but also critically, you have to understand where they are when it comes to critical thinking. Because I find a lot of students come on to do their PhD, and actually it's simply because they think it's an additional qualification. So you have to be empathetic to their misunderstanding of that, but also their understanding of what they think research is. Once you have a good roadmap of where they're coming from, or once you're able to appreciate that these are the possible pitfalls, you can work with them carefully to help them develop their strengths.
Yeah. So much of what you're saying is part of the workshop that I deliver on cross-cultural communication. And it's if anybody does have a student from another culture, or you are in fact from another culture, it's a great workshop to come along to get a deeper understanding of everything that Sasha was just mentioning there, the active listening and the idea about research in certain cultures. You know, they not plagiarizing, but basically emulating the idea, not being able to create your own original idea isn't part of what research is. So yeah, it's really a very useful workshop, and I'll actually be talking to some of the things that you just talked about now, but thank you for putting on your mic. I'm just going to add this one as well, flexibility. Okay, well, thank you. We'll please keep talking and chatting, because I said it is quite a small, we only have like 6 or 7 people here. All right, so that sort of segues nicely into the cross-cultural considerations. I don't go into it in detail today, but in the actual workshop, I mentioned things like assumptions, and that's what I was just saying. In some cultures, the job of the scholar is to reiterate the widely accepted truths rather than challenge the knowledge. And I think that's what you need to understand, that's what the students think they're doing, and that's what Sasha mentioned as well. So as a supervisor, you might assume that your student knows how to be an academic researcher, and the very nature of what research means is actually unspoken. But so when they think their job is to reveal the truth, you need to explain to them that they're actually supposed to argue with the research. So that's some area that we talk about in that workshop. The next one is cultural differences in power and status. And I think that's quite self-explanatory. I talk about, in this workshop, I talk about high power distance cultures, and they are the cultures where there's a higher level of inequality in the culture that's accepted without question. And in those high power distance cultures, there's a deference to authority. And I think as a supervisor, you need to be aware if your student is from this high power distance culture, because you may think your student is listening to your feedback and taking it on board, but what they're doing is following the values of their cultural norms, and they're not questioning your authority. So we go into a greater discussion about that in another workshop. As I said, I'm just briefly touching it on it today. Another cultural consideration in feedback centers around saving face. Again, students from those high power distance cultures tend to have a need to save face. That may mean they don't ask direct questions. They may bring in a third party to answer the questions instead of asking you directly. So where you may think it's rude, it's just a cultural norm that they have. Something else that we discuss in that workshop is how certain cultures have varying expectations for following rules. So as you know, the poor HDR student has to decipher a myriad of rules and regulations. Some students are from cultures where rules are determined by individual cases, but this obviously isn't congruent with the way Australians follow rules. So what your role is to explain which rules are bendable and which ones aren't. So the workshop covers a whole heap of other issues, but I think it was just important today to mention that there are considerations, cross-cultural considerations when giving feedback. So it's something that you need to consider. And please come along to the workshop if you're able. Okay, so here comes the biggest part of today, which is the strategies. So giving effective feedback, it's a key skill for you. This kind of feedback that you're giving, it needs to reinforce and encourage. And when you provide that feedback well, it's going to provide clarity and focus. Feedback that's given poorly, it's delivered poorly, it really can destroy confidence and motivation. It can destroy your relationship. And so it's really important that you get it right. All right, so here we go. Here are my 10 strategies. Once again, if you feel I've not mentioned all of them, please contact me later, and I'm happy, to always keep improving the iterations of this workshop. So the first strategy is progressive feedback. So obviously different types of feedback are appropriate at different times and different stages. I'm suggesting to you that the feedback that you give at the start of the journey is different from the feedback that you give at the final stages. So at the start of Canada, you can see I've listed some points. Students are overwhelmed. They may lack skills, even just looking at databases and understanding their research question. So at this point, if you give really harsh feedback, it can honestly be devastating. So at this early stage, you're focusing on creating trust with your student. You're getting to know your HDR student. And so you need to be creating those regular meetings, providing specific tasks and doing regular check-ins, because what's happening at this early stage is you're building their confidence. And as their confidence and competence increases, you can become more critical. I also just want to stress that all students are different, and we'll be talking about this later as well. Some of your students may need more encouragement than others, and actually they may need it all the way through, okay? It may not just be at the start of candidature. So then you might find others who really do want that tough feedback. So it's really important for you to get to know your PhD student right at the start, or excuse me, your HDR student right at the start. Okay, so the next strategy is constructive feedback. So the purpose of the constructive feedback is to help the person receiving it get closer to some goal or to some target. It could be at the end of candidature, it could be at the end of a goal, a milestone, or at the end of finishing a chapter, but it's providing that direction. So we never say you're wrong if the student's off track. Instead, we ask them to reflect and offer suggestions and changes. Okay, so giving that real constructive feedback as they're working towards that goal. The third strategy, and I think so important, and I really want to stress that we can never underestimate the power of positive feedback, is and I guess really as a researcher and academic yourself, you are trained to be critical. You are trained to find flaws in arguments and inconsistencies. That's part of your role. But it's really important that you give positive feedback, because your students learn from positive feedback just like they learn from your critical feedback. They need and they want your reassurance. So you can give them positive feedback on their abilities, their skills, and their performance, and also confirm what lays ahead, the feasibility of what lays ahead. I would like to ask you to reflect right now, to think about the last time you gave some positive feedback to your student. What is it? You don't need to tell us, but you're welcome to if you want. What did you say? And also, did you notice a change in your student? Ken has written that there are a couple of areas where supervisors should be a bit stricter and harsher if necessary, like integrity and safety. And absolutely, I would absolutely agree with that. And thank you for that input. So does anybody, can you just have a quick reflection? Do you remember the last time you said something positive? It could be something really simple. Again, if you like to share it with us, you're welcome. And more so, what were the effects of your positive feedback?
Yeah, so I remember during the COVID period, and I had a student who was not able to go back to their country to collect some feedback. Now, this was really important because it involved some performances that they would have to film and record. But what had happened at the beginning of a research process is I had suggested to them that they should, every single interview that they had with the people that they were working with, they should just record it and put it down. And they thought it was too much work. So at one point I said, actually, no, I want you to do it because I'm not there. And at that point, I looked like a helicopter parent. But the idea was to get them to capture everything so that they had some of that kind of salient data that would obviously not be expressed. Because once you went into formal interviews, you sometimes wouldn't get anything. And we did that. And so when the period came when they couldn't travel, we suggested to them that, do you remember all that stuff that you recorded, that you had to record? So where is it? He said, oh, so I had this somewhere. I said, well, guess what? You're not able to travel. That's going to form the basis for your data. So you have collected a substantial part of your data. So first of all, start dating them properly and start looking for consistencies in the argument. That's the first thing. Just do that. Well, the person came back about a week later and they'd gone a whole lot further in how they'd broken the data down. And I congratulated them for doing that. And I said, you've done a really good job. Why did you do it? They said, oh, do you remember when you said I should always look at keywords? I said, yes. So I looked at the keywords, then I researched the keywords, then I looked for the key thoughts on that, key thinkers on that area. And it helped me to be able to look at my data again, because I haven't been able to travel. I thought they'd done a really good job. So I told them that, you've done a really good job because you've done some really good critical lateral thinking and practical application. And also encourage them, telling them that actually the way you've approached it in this pandemic period could be a contribution to your study.
Great.
And they thought it was really, they didn't expect that they would do so well, but it was quite a good idea. They were really happy about it.
And probably they were most, they were happiest that you, praised them.
Encourage them.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, they're working now in their they've gone back to their country, they're in their university, and ever so frequently they want to tell me what is happening there. And so it's interesting because some kind of relationship has been developed academically as a result of the new learning. So it's quite good and rewarding.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Rebecca's also put in the chat that she likes to give positive feedback when she sees students getting closer to structuring their research argument and understanding how to critique the research literature. They are then on their way to understanding the purpose of being a non-biased open researcher. And she thinks this is the turning point for the HDR student. And I think that's great, Rebecca, and thank you for reflecting on when you give positive feedback. And I just would like all of you to just, a big part of today is reflecting on your supervisory skills and the ways in which you provide feedback. So just reflecting on that and remembering next time the power of that positive feedback. And as Tasha just mentioned, it can also be the bridge to creating that lovely professional relationship as well. All right, so I'll move on to the next strategy, which is timely feedback. So I don't know what you think is reasonable turnaround time to provide written feedback. Perhaps we can have a little chat about that, or you can share your ideas. Oops, excuse me, let me go back. But do you do it page by page? Do you do it chapter by chapter? Do you do it in smaller chunks? But I just have a little quote here, it's a little outdated now, but feedback is generally considered to be most helpful if it is timely and can be acted upon by students. So if you want to let us know how regularly do you provide that written feedback? Do you have a process?
I think it can depend a bit on the student. Depends what experience they have in writing, how much experience they have in their topic area, that kind of thing. So sometimes I think for the most part, page by page is sort of too frequent or too small a chunk. So sometimes, for example, it might be the methods or the discussion or, you know, of the paper that they're working on.
Mhm.
Yeah, but it also can depend on where the student is at in their like writing skill, I guess.
Yeah, and whether they're, you know, which chapter they're doing. Yeah, good. Rebecca's saying she provides written feedback at each supervision meeting. And are they quite regular? Rebecca, do you have them fortnightly, monthly? Does that change according to candidature? Okay, fortnightly as well. I want you to learn from each other here today as well. You know, we can all learn from what our peers and colleagues do. So yeah, thanks for letting us know. Is there anybody else who'd like to suggest how often they provide feedback? Written feedback? Yeah. And I guess, yes, it does depend on what part of candidates you're at, what they're working on. Good. But I guess so then the point that I'd like to make is students will benefit most by getting feedback that's given timely, because once they've written it and have that courage to actually send it to you, if it comes back, you know, in a long time after they've sent it to you, they may have even forgotten about it as well. So it's important to be timely, just like it's important for them to respond to your feedback queries that you have in a timely way as well, because supervisors also forget as well. So Ken's saying there's a weekly update and written feedback. So do you do a weekly update with your students, Ken? That's excellent. Okay, great. So interesting, isn't it? Or how there's so many different types of supervision. All right, well, I'll move along, and I think this segues nicely to specific feedback. So feedback that is specific can provide detailed or specific information on what your student did well, and conversely on what they did poorly. So we're going to go through this in detail right now. So if you, for example, put a comment, and I think I have a picture next here. If you do this to your students' work, or if you write, this is vague, they may not know what you mean. Is the whole section page, is the whole chapter vague? Oh my God, what does that mean? So I think it's really important that you have that real specific advice. If you just cut this out with a big explanation, your student might cry and just say, oh my God, I'm terrible at writing. If you just put the word okay, they may think, oh, it's not great, it's only okay, but you may mean, okay, this is good. So I think it's really important to be specific. I guess it can be argued there's somewhat of a finality in these one word written comments. So again, not only are you writing it, we do need to have that communication. So it's not just like cut it. If you are able to talk to your students and say, look, I've cut this section because blah, blah, blah. So there needs to be more information. So I was going to suggest some ways that you could do that if you can't meet face-to-face all the time. So, here are some examples. So if you see needs work, the student may be thinking, it's wrong, I have no idea what's needed. But what you could say alternatively is you need to show more clearly how your results support the hypothesis. So just consider next time when you are doing question marks or cutting, really give them more specific information as to what you mean. And just as I'm telling you now to be specific, I'm also telling them to ask for specific questions. So that's my next slide, I think. I tell your students, I use this feedback hierarchy, which is I've taken from Thinkwell. And this is a great little hierarchy. It starts with spelling and grammar at the bottom, and it moves up to paragraphs, blah, blah, blah. At the very top, you can see this is the highest level of the hierarchy, and the issues that are going to appear and the students need to ask your feedback on. These are the areas that require significant academic ability, and they strongly reflect the qualities of doctoral level scholarship. So I encourage your students, students should never have the spelling, should never ask you about spelling and grammar. They may want to say to you, is the content of this paragraph enough? Do I need more, another source here? Should I elaborate? And so on. So they can also ask you, is the structure and the flow good in this paragraph? So when the student sends me writing, for example, sometimes I get a whole chapter, and the student, if I see them in a one-to-one capacity, they'll say, I'd like to discuss chapter 7 with you. Well, that's not good enough. And when I meet them, I say to them, do you do this to your supervisor? You need to say, I'd like to look at this section in paragraph 7. I want you to please look at the A, B, and C, and explicitly focus me, help me, provide care and maintenance for me. And that's what they should be doing for you as well. Telling them explicitly what area they need you to help them in. So that's something that I say to them, but it's also something that you need to say to them as well. When you give me your document, put a note, highlight it, tell me exactly what is it that you want me to help you with, okay? So that's something that I encourage you to encourage your students to ask for that explicit feedback. Excuse me. When they're responding, they can create a table. If you say, add an organizing statement to the end of the introduction, they can say, okay, I've done it. And if you give them another response, then the student has to write back, I believe that you were referring to the word relationship, blah, 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 but be really explicit, because, excuse me, everyone. I'm just saying okay or needs work, it's very vague, and we definitely need to respond to explicit things, and so we can do so with the table. We could also do so with the reply. I don't know if you get your students to use the reply to a comment that you've written. I think this is just such an easy tool. So do you guys use this reply or response when you're dealing with your students? Yeah, it's available to us. It's so easy. And then you can ask them to put in a date or however you need to do, but you need to have that discussion as well. This is how I would like you to respond to my feedback. And it really refers back to what Rebecca was saying earlier, time management skills of the supervisor, and taking that time at the beginning to establish all your expectations and guidelines with your student right at the start. And if you haven't done that, you can still do that now, just to establish how you want them to respond to your feedback, etc. Okay, something else that I'm adding today, and I remember talking to supervisors earlier this year, and one of the supervisors approached me after the workshop and said, Tasha, I've had an epiphany. I cannot believe that I do not have to edit or use track changes on my students' writing. You can, but this is not your job. You're not required to edit. Neither am I as the language and learning educator. My job, and when I meet your students in a one-to-one capacity, is to identify their writing issues. If I can identify that the students don't have a topic sentence, they're not clearly organizing their sections, they're having, 10 paragraphs in a section that has no organized. If I can identify that and show them, that's my job. So I just want to say you're not expected to do your students' work. You're not expected to write their chapters or even parts of their chapters. You're not even expected to proofread their work and their spelling and their grammar and to edit. You're not editors, and it's really your students' job. If you identify that your students are having continually making mistakes with their grammar, then you can bring that to their attention. You can send them to me and then I can identify which grammar issues they're having problems with. Like many students have a problem with the subject and the verb agreeing, doing mistakes in articles like and the, you know, that plural form, the prepositions, sometimes overly using passive tense. There's lots of issues. Tense is a massive problem. We have all of this support, the HDR writing support team. We have a whole document on the tense that you should use. But again, it's not my job to change their tense. It's my job to show them what tense that they should be using and explaining it to them. And they are that active feedback agent. Their job is to go and fix it. And I think you really need to leave today knowing that it's not your job to edit, but you can identify issues. Rather than editing and providing track changes, you're providing guidance on how to structure the work, the scope of the work. You're advising on questions of methodology. Your job is to warn them if they're going off course, if it's misguided, if they've been too adventurous or too esoteric, too enormous in their scope. That's what my supervisor keeps saying to me. And if things go wrong, that's what your job is. Clearly, you cannot give this guidance without seeing and discussing their written work. So obviously you need to look at it, but absolutely you don't need to edit. All right, so we'll move to the next point. I'd also like to say to you that another strategy is to give objective comments. So, you know, when things aren't going well, people can slip into a personal criticism. I doubt it happens very often, but effective feedback is objective. So that means we need to focus on the facts and the evidence. You can see in the left column here, there's some personal criticisms. I don't think anybody would make these comments, but if a supervisor did make this comment, it would be really difficult for a student to hear. So the column on the right are the objective comments. They really are saying the same thing, but they're being more objective and more importantly, they're being more specific. Okay, so I'll just leave that with you to please remember to be to focus on facts and evidence. And maybe it is timely to let you know that we also have a workshop on tough conversations. And I've just finished that workshop, but there is a recording of it on the on the Supervisor Blackboard site. And there's lots of information on all the processes and procedures and all the support that you have with the GRC, with my team as well. If any of you are interested in getting the slides, just put a little message in the chat for me now and I'll remember to send you through the slides. Also, someone's just written me a question. So Ken's just asked me if students get demanding on definition of whose job it is to edit. Well, really, they should never be demanding of the editing. I think they actually receive some funds that they can get an editor. The GRC have a list of editors that they can use. But honestly, I often get students sent to me and the supervisors will even say to me, Tasha, can you please edit this work? And that's not what I do. What I do, as I mentioned, is identify where the issues is. And honestly, it's across disciplines, regardless of the faculty, it's usually the same common areas. And it just comes down to, well, I have a list of 10 of them. And I have other slides about that as well. So I might just send them all in a follow-up email. But yeah, just creating that clear paragraph with a topic sentence, engaging the reader, using your critical voice, showing the value of your research. You know, there's just these common things. But obviously, if there are grammar issues, it's mostly around tense and articles, and the students need to fix it. And the best way they can do it is by reading the literature They emulate the writers. Like if they see those keywords, if it has an article like the, they need to remember it, they need to know it, and they need to make the effort to understand when to use the articles. Hopefully that's helped you a little bit. Okay, so strategy 7. I think this, Astache was talking before about having international students, and I think this is a really important strategy. And it's a common complaint that I hear from supervisors. The student sits there, they don't say anything, they don't engage. Well, today I'd like to ask you to reflect on the airtime that you give your student in your meetings. I want you to pay attention to your airtime. Can you believe this? 80% of airtime is usually taken up by the supervisor. Have a think now, reflect on the airtime in the last meeting you had with your student. Who did the talking? I want to remind you to minimize the amount of telling and involve the student more. Don't forget, we said that feedback is that two-way street, okay? And I actually had a student this morning, an international student. It was a one-to-one, and I asked him about what he meant about a particular sentence, and I said to him, we need to change this. And then I said, would you like to do it together now, or would you like to think about it and do it later? And he said, can we do it now? I said, okay, well, you say what you think and I'll be your scribe. And I sat there and I waited, and it got even to the point where it was a little bit uncomfortable, but I've lived overseas for a long, long time and I speak another couple of languages. So I understand, and I waited a little bit more, and it was amazing. In fact, I wish I had been able to video it. It was amazing. So I was the scribe for him, and I just wrote, and he made the most precise sentence, because his problem was forgetting to be precise. Instead of saying a long time, he needs to tell me how long and the actual context. And I think it was to the point where, maybe you would think it's uncomfortable, but you will be surprised that what active listening can do. It can help you, it can help your student. You may even be surprised at your student's ability, and it may actually help your relationship as well. So please try this. Consider your airtime, and remember, pause, wait. If English isn't their first language, and let's see what happens. Remember, there's that high power distance cultures as well. So that segues to the telling versus coaching. Coaching is you're able to lead your student to their own exploration of their options. I think someone mentioned that earlier. A key focus, a key role of yours is to develop, is the students developing their own insights and responsibility for their development. You want to challenge your student to develop their own solutions. Okay, so instead of saying, this is how you restructure it, we could coach them by asking them, is there a way to restructure this chapter so that it flows better as well? Yeah, Stashik's saying, agreeing with me, help them develop the confidence to think independently. Okay, so this next strategy, it's a little detailed, but I really love it, and I'm excited to share it with you today. I read an article by Strack and Kumar, and they analyze written feedback provided by supervisors and also thesis examiners. So in their article, they divided feedback into 3 broad categories. So it was the referential, directive, and expressive. We're going to look at them in a greater detail in a minute. But also, the article connects how feedback affects the self-regulated learning process. I was talking to you about that earlier. In their article, they stress that self-regulation is one of the aims of doctoral education. It's the aim to train scholars to become those independent researchers and highly self-regulated learners. So probably you've all heard this term. I'm not sure if you have. It's a big part of my gig, but self-regulation is the aim, oh, I've just said this, of doctoral education. So to train your HDRs to become independent. All right. So next. So we're going to look at it. I want you to consider the type of written feedback you give your students. Referential refers to providing that information, that labeling. It's editorial, it's organization or the content. Directive feedback is really getting something done. It's a suggestion, a question, or perhaps an instruction. Then you have expressive feedback, and that's praising, even criticizing is part of expressive feedback, and then giving your opinion. So in this article, Kumar was the supervisee when he wrote this article. And so self-regulation shows that expressive feedback, that's the praise, criticism, and opinion, played a major role in his self-regulated learning process. And now as a supervisor, he continues to influence his current practice as a supervisor, as an academic, using expressive feedback. Ken suggesting a reasonable mix, and I would agree with you as well. So here's some more examples of editorial, organizational, and content. I'll just let you look at them. And then we have that more directive feedback. And then the expressive feedback. Consider your punctuation. Consider your punctuation as well. So before I reveal to you what the dominant form of feedback by both examiners and supervisors is, what do you think? What do you think is the dominant? Referential, directive, or expressive?
Do you mean?
Sorry, the dominant form.
The most common?
Yes, sorry, the dominant, the most common form.
Yeah.
Well, I already clicked on the slide.
Ah.
Who's speaking? Sorry.
Oh, it's
Victoria again.
Yes, sorry, I thought you could see me.
Yes, I can now. So findings show that referential feedback was the dominant or the most common form of feedback for examiners and supervisors. Expressive feedback ranked second, and directive feedback was last. So as I said, Vijay Kumar, he used expressive feedback when he was a student. He received expressive feedback, and it helped him so much that he also uses it in his own supervision now. So I'm just showing this to you, and as Ken suggested, we need to do a reasonable mix of these. I want you to be conscious of the type of feedback you're giving. Are you just giving directive feedback? Are you just giving referential feedback? Be conscious of that. And I'd like to suggest too that expressive feedback can promote that self-regulated learning during the doctoral learning. And perhaps self-regulation is actually one of the ultimate goals, where your supervisor is becoming part of that intellectual community. There we go. So consider if you praise your students, if you give your opinions, next time you're giving your written feedback. Okay, so the last strategy I'd like to highlight today is that people are different. We all have different styles of learning, of working, and of communicating. We all know that when these different styles come up against each other, there can be misunderstanding, there can be frustration, and then there can be conflict. Very recently, my team, we participated in a team building workshop, and we were introduced to the color spectrums. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a way of profiling personalities, and it's based on the Myers Briggs Typology Inventory, the MBTI. So we use this color profile tool and it consisted of 4 colors. I'm just quickly tell you, we did a self-definition of our brightest color to confirm our identity and profile ourselves. So red was the doer, the person who takes action. Blue was the carer. Yellow is the organizer and the rule follower. Green was the thinker and the planner. Anyway, the outcome of this little activity showed us that there are differences in styles of communicating and differences in the way we work. And these differences should be valued. So I'm just referring to this today to remind you, we're not all the same. And it was actually really great for me to see someone in my team, right, she's a yellow. And it can really increase our tolerance and our understanding of different behaviors and dynamics. And so just like, the supervisory team, you may have differences as well. You have differences to your students. So we really need to acknowledge the different styles of communicating. Another article that I was reading recently talked about how effective feedback should be tailored. And we have been talking about that today. Your job is to continually make those judgments on how to formulate feedback to your students. And as we looked at that Strack and Kumar, those 3 types of written feedback, you can ask yourself these questions. Do you tell students explicitly how to do their research? Do you suggest a range of options? Do you withhold advice altogether to allow your students to make those decisions autonomously? It's a challenge for supervisors when communicating with your students during those meetings, how to judge when to allow them to conduct that research independently or when to guide them. So it has to be tailored. And yeah, I think we're all well aware of that. So the next part of today is to reflect on your feedback practices and on obviously continue to adapt your supervisory style. So I'm going to put you into one room. I think that's probably good. No, actually, maybe I'll put you into 2 rooms. So there's Ivy's here with me, and then we have 6 others. So I might put you into 2 rooms, that's 3 people in each room. And I'd like to remind you, if you do talk about any particular student, please remember to de-identify your student. But it's an opportunity to meet colleagues from different disciplines and perhaps talk to each other about how many students you're supervising, and even just your supervision background. Are you a novice supervisor? Have you been doing this for a long time? And these are the 3 questions. I might actually put it in the chat for you so that you remember. So the 3 questions to consider are, what do you consider the strengths and weaknesses of your own supervisor? Reflect back to when you had your own supervisor. How did you learn the practices? Often supervisors say, I learned from my own supervisor, or my supervisor did this badly, so I wanted to do it well when I became a supervisor. And then also reflect, and Rebecca's just asked, do you recommend using the feedback comment bank? Oh, yes, I'll talk to you about that later, Rebecca, sorry. And the last question is, what do you consider your own strengths and weaknesses of your own supervision style? Okay, so these are the things that I'd like you to discuss today. Please be patient while I put you into 2 breakout rooms. If for some reason something happens and I have to move you, I apologize, but I'll give you about 10 or 15 minutes just to meet each other, have a reflection. And I think these are always great opportunities to connect with each other. All right, here we go. See you. Let's come back about 2:15. All right, the Zoom gods will put you together. I'll see you soon. Okay. Yes, excellent. A few people back now. Okay, great. I hope you enjoyed that. It's always nice to talk to others about, their experiences. Would anybody like to share something you spoke about in the breakout room?
We were just talking about the difficulty when you seem to be writing the same comments sort of over and over again, but you're not sure why they're not picking up or understanding that point, and they just continually make the same errors, I guess.
Are they like organizational style comments, Rebecca? What can you give an example?
Probably. Is it Joe? Would you like to comment? Because this is your student, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, mainly organizational. I find it difficult to comment on other things without at least having some structure and kind of narrative there. Or if I do, then later I think, or if I do, then it often becomes irrelevant later once you start to get the structure. Once you start to get more of a narrative there.
And I think it's something that you can do if it's organizational is tell them. I mean, that's coming up in my slides soon, but get them to come to GRED writing support. That's what we do. We talk to them about their structure, and we have workshops about the lit review, the introduction chapter. I have a really great writing circle on the common writing errors. I actually have it for supervisors as well. I've mirrored it so that what and I'll add those slides as well to the follow-up email today. What are the top 10 common errors, regardless of faculty? And then if they can see it. So it's not just you telling them. If they see, oh, Tasha's saying the same thing as Joe, then I really need to work on this. And also, if you are really desperate, you can get them to have one-to-one support with us, and we sit down. It's a transparent process. We include the supervisors in follow-up conversations so that everyone's on board, that what the advice I'm providing the student, that you're aware of it and you're seeing it as well. Obviously, my advice is on academic writing. It's not on the content ever, but it's also just having that support from an external person can help your students sort of wake up and go, oh, right, maybe that's something that we can do for you.
Yeah, okay. Oh, well, I have suggested several times that he go to the different things that you run, but and I think he may have I think it's hard as well, because students who come here are generally people who are, have done really well in school and university and work. So I don't know, I think there's something around maybe FACE or something like that around going to get support from someone else.
Sure. Why don't you reach out to me after this, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you and see how we can support you to support your student. But they're yeah, and honestly, that constant, I've told them this, I've said this before, it is taxing. It's taxing on you, it's taxing on your relationship. But you do have support at the university, like myself and my team. Is there anything else that anyone would like to raise before we move on? Was it a nice a chance for you to reflect? Yeah, why do I supervise like this? Have you ever even thought about that before?
Yeah, quite often. But one other thing I've been thinking about, I don't know, do you ever give feedback also, like when I'm reading something, I usually, like you just imagine I'm talking to the person and I put in my comments, but I was also wondering about recording, like that kind of think aloud.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. My supervisor asks me, because I'm a PhD candidate myself, and in fact my my research is on supervision, interestingly. And my supervisor has offered, just record me, Tasha, put, record everything, because often whatever he says, I just like, oh, can you say that again? So, if you offer that to your students, they may, be so grateful to have that. But if you want to record yourself and provide feedback that way, absolutely. But remember, it has to be that that two-way sort of process as well.
Yeah.
Does anyone have? Yeah, Rebecca.
Oh, I just was going to say, my students all record. Like, that's sort of where you set that up at the beginning. So every supervision meeting is recorded. And then I also get them to just give me a summary at the end of our meeting of what they've agreed to do and also what I've agreed to do, because I just find when you've got many students to look after and then you're teaching units as well, I can quickly forget what I said I wanted to do for them. But I just find those summaries and I put them in for the next meeting about what I've agreed to do has been really helpful too. And I know it's a little bit off track, it's not about feedback, but I guess it just kind of helps, in terms of, in the past, I've been able to say, actually, if you go back and watch that meeting, I really talked about whatever the feedback was. And I think you need to go back and just listen to that again and revisit that. And, and I have found that helpful. So
it's just, as I'm listening to you talk, I have so many comments, and I think as well, sometimes when you throw someone like me in the mix, because I'm that sort of middle person, and there's no what's the word, they feel like they can ask me those questions that they're scared to ask you as well. And there's that that power imbalance is less obvious. So bringing the writing support in is definitely a way to support your feedback that you're giving. I also just thought I just want to provide another little story here, and it comes back to what Stashe mentioned earlier about empathy. I had a student recently who was really upset. We do Zoom sessions, and she was talking about the feedback that her supervisor had given, and she was she really had she was mostly upset because she hadn't seen her daughter in 2 years, and I was devastated for her. And I said something about, there was a deadline, and she said, oh, my supervisor doesn't know. And I couldn't believe that her supervisor didn't know that she hadn't seen her daughter in 2 years. And I think there's also, I haven't got it in these slides, and I was going to add it very quickly when you're in your breakout room, but I did this workshop on tough conversations recently, and I ended with the idea of kindness. And I think that that's also, I just wanted to mention it here as well. Sometimes there's things going on in your students' lives, and conversely, things going on in your lives. And, we don't know unless we tell the people as well. But that was something I just thought I'd mention to you today, because I was really surprised that, such a profound impact on her mental health, not being able to see her baby, her very, very young child in 2 years, was really impacting on her progression and her ability to take on feedback as well. So there's always, it's always good to be reminded that we do have things that are not always obvious. All right. I think I'm conscious of the time. This was meant to be an hour and a half, so I'll just keep going if you don't mind. If students don't take your feedback on board, it can be very frustrating, and I hear that a lot, especially when you've given a lot of time giving feedback. Sometimes we blame the student, and as I just mentioned now, there can be other causes for that. So I will include the slides on tough conversations, and just to show you all the support that you have and also that your students have. If your students don't follow your feedback, maybe you could check Was it unclear? Maybe there was some misunderstanding. Maybe your student actually don't have the skills or to understand. It could be a time issue. Maybe your student actually doesn't agree with your feedback and perhaps some cultural considerations. As I've just been saying to you, we are the HDR writing support team. I don't know if you've used us before, if you know about us or your students know about us, but we have so much support. There's a tiered approach here. As I said earlier, we have online self-help resources, and they can be things like how to write your abstract. And I've been getting so many people requesting abstract help recently that I'm going to do a writing circle on it next year. So I think it's just too important. But we have documents on tenses, you know, and students can go, even prepositions. There's lots of online self-help. They're all PDFs and printable resources. Then we have the recording. So everything we do is recorded and available on the HDR Student Blackboard site. Make sure your students know about us and have gone to the Blackboard community, the HDR Student Blackboard community. The tier 2 is our biggest support, and they're our writing support sessions. So we have workshops, writing circles, peer feedback sessions. I'm the facilitator of a lounge where students do focused writing. We have at least 1 or 2, sometimes 3 events happening a week. We have some of your students regulars. We all know them in the team. They come to everything. It's amazing. I really encourage you to get your student to come to our events. The last tier is the one-to-one support. There's just 2 of us. There's myself and Dr. Kerry Freeman. We give one-to-one support, and we give that support to students who are in need. They're going to fail a milestone. They're under review. But if you just need, we also provide help to students who you want us to support because of whatever reason. You have to fill out an HDR early alert form for that. It's not the early alert form, it's the HDR early alert form. As I mentioned, it's a transparent process. We keep you involved. It's a really wonderful system. Kerry and I have helped so many students get through difficult times. But once again, it is just the 2 of us. So we provide 3 sessions to begin with. And once again, it's not editing, it's just exposing them to the areas that they need. Ken's just put something, it's always important to be available and accessible. Decades ago, I came to some university somewhere and saw a note on the prof's door saying, "Prof talks to students from 10 to 11 on Tuesdays. Please contact the secretary." And that helped me to develop a way to interact with my students when they message him 24/7, except for time to sleep. Well, you're very, very kind. Yeah. I know Christopher Barnacolic, he tells us that all of your students have he has a WhatsApp account for students, and he's really accessible to his students as well. And I think it's just something that you need to outline at the start. You know, there's an expectations document that you can look at, and see Ken saying WeChat's even better. So it's up to you, but make those guidelines with your student. So just also, we have lounges. This is a lounge. Students do focused writing, but more than that, it's a chance for them to maintain their well-being and meet other students. I'm the facilitator of this. I love it. I have these wonderful regulars. We use the Pomodoro timer. I'm doing a writing retreat session soon. Thanks, Victoria. And your students can come along, get some focused writing done, and I walk them through activities like using the word this or it. It's so confusing for the writer. So I have different activities as well. There are also peer feedback sessions that Kerry, my colleague, facilitates. So we're nearly at the end. I just want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. The ACOLA review of Australia's research training system in 2016 said, one of the most fundamental factors determining the quality of HDR training experiences and output is the quality of supervision. So thank you for coming to today's session on feedback techniques. thank you for wanting to develop your supervisory practices. And I also have this slide, and there'll be clickable links when I send the slides out to you. This was from a recent blog, the ACGR Impact blog, about feedback in supervision. So it's also something for you to look at. Critical math have more opportunities for discussions with peers. Thank you. I'm just going to, if you will kindly fill out a 4-word, if it lets me. I'm working from home today, and it's just being. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to fill out that very short survey on supervision. And as I mentioned, part of today is to meet others. It's to help you to think about the importance of reflecting. You always ask your students to reflect. I'm asking you today to also reflect on your supervision style with giving feedback. Remember that you are the key way in which the doctorate is achieved. It's written again and again in literature. So thanks for being here, and I appreciate any comments or feedback that you have for me. Thanks all.
Okay.
Thanks, Rebecca.